The day I gave up my own dinner, it was 95 in the shade, and I had blisters from shifting pallets and steel-toed boots that weren't even mine. Name's Chase Miller. I was 21, hauling freight on the late shift down on Bramble Ridge Road, trying to hold things together for Mom and my little sister in a heat-baked Alabama town called Cedar Hollow. Mom, Kimberly, was 52 and running on pills and grit after her second round of radiation. Alice was 12 and still asked if we could keep every stray dog we saw. The three of us lived in a saggy rental with siding that peeled like sunburn. That morning, I split a can of beans 3 ways and told them I'd eat at work. I wouldn't. I didn't even have a lunch break half the time, and I wasn't about to spend my last dollar on chips and pretend it was a meal. Quick note. Before we start, share in the comments. How's your day going, and where are you joining from? And let's continue. After I saw them off to bed, I crossed the road with a cracked mason jar full of hot broth and not much else. That's when I saw her, Dorothy Wilson, sitting stiff as a fence post on her front porch across the street, hands folded over an old pie tin like it was a security pass. I'd seen her before, sure. Everyone had. Folks said she was a housekeeper back in the day, stitched clothes, cleaned for families that probably didn't even learn her name. Now she lived alone in a shotgun house with a porch that leaned like it was tired. Mrs. Gray next door, 60-something, ran her mouth like it was a job, saw me looking and said, "Leave that woman be, Chase. She don't need your pity." I didn't answer her, just kept walking across the road, slow, careful. The jar in my hand steamed a little. I said, "Evening, ma'am. You look like you could use something warm." She blinked, like I'd pulled her out of sleep, then said, "You don't owe me a thing, son." "I know," I said, and held out the jar. She took it like she wasn't sure it was real. "Dorothy," she said after the first sip. "Just Dorothy." "Chase," I told her. "I'll come back tomorrow." Didn't plan to say that. The words just landed. Behind me I heard the fence boys, Earl and Jax, snort like farm animals. "Charity boy," one of them said. Not loud, just enough. I let it slide. I had no time for small men with full bellies. Back inside, Mom was half asleep on the couch, remote still in her hand. I walked past her into the kitchen and washed the same stew pot twice, like maybe that would change how empty it was. "You can't save the whole county," she mumbled from the couch. "Just trying to keep one person upright," I said, and started drying the pot like it mattered. The next week moved like wet cement. Every day, same rhythm. I clocked out from the dock with my back on fire, walked home, threw together whatever we had, rice, canned tomatoes, maybe some broth if we got lucky, and set a jar aside for Dorothy before I even filled our own bowls. I didn't bring speeches, didn't bring pity, just supper and the same nod hello. She'd always meet me on that leaning porch, straight-backed in her chair, eyes sharp even when her hands trembled. At first, she talked like every word cost her, just enough to let me know she wasn't helpless. She told me about a house out on Dry Fork where she'd scrubbed tile with vinegar and raw hands, how the women there made her wash their guest linens twice even if nobody had slept in the bed. Never gave names, just called them those folks. But the way her jaw set, you could tell she remembered every face. She told me she hated pity, but liked when people didn't waste food. I asked how she liked her tea, and she said, "Plain as water, and no sugar." I earned bitter. That stuck with me. One night I told her I was studying for the county search and rescue entrance test. I said it like it was nothing, just a thing I was doing on the side. But her eyes narrowed like she was measuring me. "Emergency services?" she asked. I nodded. "About time someone wanted to be found instead of lost," she said, and I swallowed that like medicine. Word got around fast, quicker than gossip had any right to. "Chase is feeding the Wilson woman." I heard it from 2 aisles over at Quince's Market. 2 women near the bread rack looked at me like I was writing checks from their accounts. One of them said, "He gives away his food?" The other whispered, "That old woman's half mad," like I was doing community service for a ghost. I didn't respond. Just picked up my bag of dry beans and moved to the register. It wasn't worth lighting a match in a store full of dry kindling. On lunch breaks at the warehouse, I sat by the loading dock, pulled up rope handling videos on my phone, and practiced knots with a torn length of nylon cord I'd pulled from a busted pallet. I wrote my time scores on the back of a folded receipt. Every loop felt like something I could control, something that didn't depend on mercy or the mood of a pharmacist. One evening, I was setting down Dorothy's jar when Earl and Jax, those same two fence-sitters who never missed a moment to run their mouths, called over. "You practicing for Saint School now?" Jax said, not even bothering to whisper. Dorothy's hand paused halfway to her mouth. Her spoon shook, and she looked at me like she expected me to take it. I stepped off her porch with my jaw tight and my boots loud on the gravel. "You got something to say? Say it to my face," I told them, calm as I could. But words don't feed. The silence hit harder than anything else. Their faces twisted up like kids who didn't get the last word, and they turned back to whatever it was they were pretending to do. When I climbed back on the porch, Dorothy didn't speak right away. Then she said, "Don't waste your breath on fellas who never spent theirs on work." That made me laugh through my nose, even with my fists still curled tight. Later that night, Mrs. Gray was out clipping coupons on her porch like she was carving stone. She didn't look at me but muttered, "People remember handouts, not who gave them." I looked right at her. "Maybe they'll remember the meal," I said, and she rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd stick. Back at the house, Mom was sipping her meds slow, trying to stretch the dose like it was tea. Alice sat at the table doing spelling homework and asked if Dorothy had any grandkids. I told her I didn't know. Felt stupid for never asking. That night, after everyone went quiet, I pulled an index card from the drawer, wrote "check roof leak for Dorothy," and stuck it to the wall beside my SAR notes. I didn't have much in the way of tools, just a flashlight, some tape, a bent screwdriver, but I figured if I could patch it for the night, it'd buy her some sleep. Laying in bed, I told myself not to get too close, that this was just neighbor stuff, a small good deed, nothing more. But the next night, when I grabbed that jar and crossed the street like always, I didn't even try to lie to myself. I was in, fully. Rain came down like the sky was dropping bricks. Thunder rolled in from Bramble Ridge, low and mean, and water crawled up the cracks in the sidewalk like it had a purpose. I was halfway across the road before I realized my left boot had a split. Didn't matter. I had a towel, a pan, and a stubborn streak too wide to turn back. Dorothy's porch light was out, but the door was cracked just enough to see her shadow hunched near the table. Rain had started slipping under the threshold, curling around her ankles. I stepped in without asking. "If it's my time, it knows my address," she said, voice steady but pale as old milk. "He can wait till I fix that," I muttered, dropping the pan under the worst drip and tossing the towel across the crack by the door. My breath hung like fog, and I could feel the cold creep into my collar. Her place was a study in stillness. One wooden chair, one chipped table, a Bible with its spine folding out, and a sewing tin with a busted hinge. In the corner sat a silver dictaphone that looked like it had seen more birthdays than I had. She coughed hard, the kind that folds a body. I got the little space heater going with the back of my hand and grabbed 2 dusty mugs from the shelf. The tea was stale and smelled like paper, but it steamed, and that was enough. That's when I saw the photo. It was tucked behind a cracked picture frame, half covered in dust like it had been waiting. Dorothy was in it, younger, hair pinned up tight, wearing a pale blouse. Beside her stood a little girl in a polka dot dress, smiling wide enough to feel it. She noticed me looking. "Rose," she said, so soft I barely caught it. "My granddaughter." She didn't finish the sentence, just stared at the picture like it had betrayed her. I looked over at the recorder. "That thing still work?" She gave a small nod. "Batteries are good. I talk to nobody on that thing when nights get long." "Can I check it?" I asked. She hesitated, then gave a tight nod. I clicked it on and hit play. At first, just static. Then her voice came through, scratchy but sure. "Rose, if time got away from you, I'm still right here. I set a cup out every night like you'll come through the gate." Dorothy didn't look at me, just closed her eyes while the sound filled the room. When it stopped, she said, "That's from months back. Didn't think I'd let anyone hear it." "I'm not anyone," I said, before I could stop myself. She didn't argue, just reached over and flipped to the next tape. This one was short. "You're still mine. No hard feelings. Bring a sweater to Cedar Hollow. The wind cuts." I swallowed something sharp and looked at the rain streaking down the window like it wanted in. We didn't talk for a long minute. The only sounds were the heater humming and the wind pushing at the door like it might come through. "I didn't leave," she said finally. "She did." I didn't ask why. She wouldn't have told me. Not then. The weight in her voice said it wasn't a story she owed me. The heater clicked off. I stood up and pulled the window tarp from my pack. Just a trash bag and a roll of painter's tape, but it would do the job. I sealed the worst corner while she watched. "Overkill," she muttered, trying not to smile. "Ma'am," I said, "that's my specialty." I checked the towel by the door. It was soaked through. I wrung it out on the porch and laid it back flat. She looked tired, like the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. But her hands had stopped shaking, and her cup was empty. I took that as a win. When the storm started thinning out, I checked the ceiling, then opened her front closet to see what I could patch with next time. Nothing useful, but I made a mental note to bring some extra trash bags from the warehouse. Maybe snag a weather strip if I could find one loose. "You always show up like this?" she asked. "Only when I don't know better," I said, and that got a quiet laugh from her. Walking home, the puddles hit my ankles, and the cold soaked through my socks, but my chest was calm in a way I couldn't explain. Not joy, not pride, just settled. I didn't do it because it made sense. I did it because it needed doing. By Saturday, the fence crew had stopped pretending they weren't watching. Earl leaned against the post like he owned the sidewalk, Jax with his foot on a cooler he hadn't opened in 3 days. They didn't throw words this time, just hung there, quiet, like they were waiting for something to drop. I stepped onto Dorothy's porch with her supper in one hand and a thermos of plain tea in the other. She nodded once, and I set everything down, turned to the fence boys without a blink. "If picking at people paid cash," I said loud enough, "y'all would own Quince's Market. Till then, eat your own words." Didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. That sentence landed with weight. Earl smirked, but Jax looked down and rubbed his neck like I'd hit something real. Mrs. Gray was across the way, clipping coupons with that stone-faced look like she was grading everyone on the block. She muttered just loud enough, "Bold talk." I glanced her way. Talk doesn't put food on a plate. That was more for Dorothy than them. The old woman smirked behind her scissors and kept clipping. At the market that afternoon, the whispers came in again. One lady at the checkout line nudged the other and said, "That's the one who gives away his own dinner." Like it was a crime to be short and still share. The cashier, a kid named Frankie, maybe 19, bagged my rice and beans, then quietly slid in a paper sack of bruised tomatoes. He didn't make eye contact. I didn't make it a moment. "Appreciate it," I said, and walked out like it was normal. Back home, Mom was in her chair doing her crossword in pen, the way she always did when her pain wasn't too bad. "You don't need to swing at every shadow," she said, not looking up. "I'm not," I told her. "Just setting lines." Alice came into the kitchen barefoot and tugged my shirt. "Can I carry the jar next time?" she asked. I looked down at her. Barely 12, serious as rain. I nodded. "Yeah, you can." She grinned like I'd handed her the moon. That night, she crossed the street beside me holding the warm jar like it was precious. Dorothy saw her coming and straightened up, the kind of straighten that meant something. "Well now," Dorothy said, smiling without showing teeth, "ain't you a fine delivery crew?" Alice gave a little curtsy and handed the jar like it was a fancy dinner plate. Dorothy took it slow, Careful. Your brother feeds me better than I deserve. He says you earned it, Alice replied, and my heart squeezed sideways. Dorothy pointed at me with her spoon. Don't let this one short himself. He'll do it every time. I shrugged. I'm fine. She raised a brow. I didn't blink, just slipped a canned peaches cup into her cabinet when she turned her head. She caught me anyway. Boy, she said, laughing once, you think you're slick. I gave her a lopsided grin and checked the patched corner of the ceiling. Still dry. That was something. She circled back to Dry Fork, the same house with the hand-washed rugs and no water offered, not to relive it, just to mark the line she'd stepped over. Some people, she said, stirring her stew, think being polite is a favor. They never had to earn their place every day. You working on a future? She asked out of nowhere. I nodded. Trying to. With SAR. She paused, then gave one slow nod, like that was the right answer. After dinner, I checked her roofline with a flashlight. The tape was holding. No water, no draft. That was a win, even if it was duct taped together. On my way back, I heard someone behind the old pavilion. The lot back there was cracked and overgrown, mostly used by kids trying to hide from curfews. I followed the noise and found a boy, maybe 9, maybe 10, crouched next to a busted-up bike, chain balled up like a knot. He was muttering under his breath, trying not to cry, hands slick with grease. I squatted down. Mind if I give it a shot? He sniffed and stepped back without answering. I flipped the bike, worked the chain loose, reset the axle, and wiped the gears with my sleeve. Then I handed him my rag. He looked at it, then up at me. What do I owe you? Get home before your mama worries, I said. He nodded, grabbed the handlebars, and took off without another word. As I turned to leave, I heard a cough behind a screen door. Mrs. Gray was at her window, one eyebrow up. Good work, hero, she said, like the words were allergic to her mouth. Then she cleared her throat and shut the curtain before I could reply. 3 nights later, right around midnight, somebody pounded on our front door, desperate and loud. I was still dressed, half asleep on the couch, and Mom sat up coughing before I even got to the latch. It was Ronnie Turner, maybe 10, soaked to the knees and out of breath. Copper ran off, he choked out. Daddy left the gate open, and he took off toward Dry Fork, I think. I didn't wait for the rest. I grabbed my headlamp, a spare leash we used on strays, my whistle, and a windbreaker. Get your boots, I told him. We're not yelling into the dark for nothing. Mom stood behind me, her voice low. Be careful, Chase. I will, I said, already stepping off the porch. 2 neighbors joined us, Mr. Halverson from down by the lot and Miss Ella from the duplex. We took the creek trail, boots squelching, flashlights jerking side to side. There were fresh paw prints in the mud, heading east toward the culvert that ran under the abandoned service road. I didn't make a speech. I set a basic search grid, fence line to the sycamore, loop back by the culvert. Everyone was to shout every 60 seconds so we didn't lose track of each other. Keep your voices steady, I said. You stop talking. I come back for you first. It was slow, messy work. The mud sucked at your feet, branches snapped in the wrong direction, and every raccoon sounded like a dying dog until we got closer. Ronnie froze near the culvert and pointed. Hear that? He whispered. It was a whine, weak, muffled. I dropped low, swung my light across the debris pile, and there he was. Copper, wedged under a collapsed gate panel from an old cattle fence, his eyes wide and wild. Don't move, I said. I slid into the mud, careful, laid flat, and pushed one arm under the panel to touch his side. He was breathing hard but not bleeding, just trapped. I worked my shoulder under the top slat, braced my boots, and heaved. The panel gave just enough. I felt it shift, then Copper scrambled free, barking once, then diving into Ronnie's arms. The kid cried first, then laughed, then cried again. We brought the dog home. Mr. Turner was in his boxers, wide-eyed and guilty. You're a lifesaver, Chase. Here, he said, trying to push a $20 bill into my hand. I stepped back. Save it for his shots, I told him. He clapped me on the back so hard I nearly fell into his wife's flower bed. Fair enough, he said, grinning like I'd done him a personal miracle. I got back home, peeled off my wet socks at the door, and Mom didn't say anything, just brought me a towel and kissed my forehead like I was 5 again. By morning, the whole block had heard about it. At Quince's, I walked in for eggs and came out with 5 different versions of the story being told in line. Chase Miller found the Turner dog in the dark. He mapped it out like the police do. Didn't even take money. Earl gave me a nod on my way out. Quick, stiff, like it hurt his neck. That nod said more than the last 6 weeks of grins and cheap shots combined. Dorothy was waiting on her porch with 2 cups. Tea for her, cold tap for me. So, she said, setting mine down, you can find your way in the black. I sat beside her and sipped. It felt right, I said. She nodded once. Some of us are made to show up. That stuck. Sat clean in my gut like something that had been waiting to click into place. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Gray wandered over with a plastic clamshell of store muffins. Somebody forgot to pick these up, she said, not quite meeting my eye. Might as well go to someone doing something useful. I took them with a nod. Thanks. She lingered, then added, I'm making a call about that pavilion roof. Didn't say what kind of call, but she said it like it meant something. At work, the foreman, Reed, a man who never smiled, pulled me aside by the punch clock. Heard about the dog, he said. You still want that search and rescue spot? Yes, sir. I'll move your Friday to Monday. You'll have time to make that practice thing out by the quarry. He didn't wait for me to thank him, just walked off. I took that gift quiet, with a banana from the break room like I'd earned it. Maybe I had. That night I crossed the road to check on Dorothy before locking in. Her porch light was on, but the door was cracked, and I didn't like the angle of her cane leaning inside. Dorothy? I called. I found her on the floor, one hip already swelling under her skirt. She winced, but didn't cry out. Don't you dare call no ambulance, she said through her teeth. I'm not, I said, but we're getting you up. I half lifted, half guided her to bed, bracing my knees and her elbow. Got the heater closer, stacked her pillows. Her breath came short, but she nodded when I checked her eyes and pulse. I stuck a sticky note to my own wallet. Clinic ride, Monday. Before I left, she pointed to the shelf. There's one more tape, she said. Don't play it yet. It's for after. I didn't say anything. Just gave a slow nod and shut the door behind me with my chest tight and something too heavy behind my ribs to name. I was standing in the kitchen peeling the plastic off a ramen cup when I saw the envelope. Big red stamp, county seal. My name spelled right for once. No case, no Chase Myler, just Chase Miller, clean as a whistle. I ripped it open with my thumb and unfolded the letter with hands I didn't realize were shaking. County SAR Academy. Testing in 19 days. Pass, and I'd be on the active roster by late fall. I let out one breath. Maybe the first real one all week. Same morning, the notice board at the warehouse lit up with red marker. Mandatory double tonight, full head count. No warning, no asking. Just posted like a rule. Overtime pay too, hours I needed. Mom's meds didn't come with mercy. I checked my phone. Dorothy's clinic appointment was in 3 days. That meant tonight was my best window to hit the SAR practice session, the one prep drill before the final test. Same night as the double shift, and Dorothy's cough had turned bad that week. Wet, chesty, sharp. I'd sat on her porch last night and listened to her hack for 10 minutes straight without saying a word. I stared at the calendar on our wall like it might blink first. Count the cost and pay at once, Mom said behind me. She didn't tell me what to pick. She never did. Just gave me the line. Same as always. Alice slipped a folded paper into my palm while I tied my boots. You can't read it till you're mad, she said. I wasn't mad, not exactly. Just stretched thin. At Quince's, I grabbed broth, pain patches, and a sleeve of saltines. Mrs. Gray was restocking the can rack like she owned the place. "You look like a man losing sleep," she said, not even turning her head. I knew what she meant. If I needed a ride, she was offering in her own sideways way. I tried calling the foreman, got the same canned voicemail. Tried the clinic, no reschedules before the following week. Tried the SAR coordinator. Practice session couldn't be moved. Exam itself, locked. I stood on the sidewalk outside our house holding 2 plastic bags like they might solve something. I didn't move for a full minute, just stared across the road until the light came on in Dorothy's window. I crossed over and knocked once, then let myself in. She was sitting up with a blanket over her lap and a half-finished jar of tea beside her. "You're looking at a choice," she said, eyes not leaving mine. "3 of them," I said, "and only one I want to make." She didn't interrupt, just waited. So I told her. All of it. The job shift, the SAR window, the cough, the pressure building behind every hour I couldn't afford to lose. She set the jar down like it was glass and said, "You'll make a dozen of these in your life. Make them clean. Don't look back too hard." I skipped the shift, skipped the practice run, drove Dorothy to the clinic for a walk-in check in my mom's car, hoping the brakes wouldn't give out on the 2 sharp turns before Maine. Her appointment was still 3 days out, but they saw her as a walk-in. Monday was circled on my note, but Friday didn't wait. She slept on the ride back, head leaned against the window, breath shallow. The light hit her hair soft, like it wasn't even the same woman who used to cut her own steak with a butter knife out of pride. "Stop here," she said when we turned onto our street. I parked near the old pavilion, the one that had been closed temporarily for 5 straight years. "Once," she said, staring at the rusted doors, "they promised hot meals in there. They never kept it." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. That sentence hit harder than anything the council or the church ever did. Back home, I got her settled and checked her heater plug again. Swapped the old blanket for a clean one from our linen closet. She didn't argue. As I stepped off her porch, Earl called out from the fence line, "You miss your big test to hold a hand?" I turned, looked him dead in the face, and said, "Words don't feed. Hands do." He didn't smile this time. Just looked down at his boots like they had something to tell him. Inside our place, Alice sat at the table with her workbook and a pencil stuck in her hair. "You still want to help with homework?" she asked, hopeful. "Absolutely," I said, pulling out a chair. We sat shoulder to shoulder working through spelling words and subtraction problems while the street outside went quiet. Later that night, after they were asleep, I sat in the kitchen alone, elbows on the table, head in my hands. I felt the cost, every bit of it, the missed shift, the missed practice, the dog-tired feeling behind my eyes, the weight of choosing someone else over your shot. But I slept. Not the restless kind where you wake up 10 times replaying what you should have done. The clean kind, the kind you earn. The morning air was clear but thin, like the wind had swept out everything soft overnight. I crossed the street with a blanket under one arm and a jar of stew warm from the stove. Dorothy was already on the porch, sitting still in her chair with her hands folded like she was waiting on something more permanent than me. Her sweater hung off her shoulders like it had belonged to a bigger woman once. Or maybe she'd just shrunk. "You got that test coming," she said, her voice low but steady. I nodded. "New date came yesterday. They moved it up 2 days. Didn't say why." She grinned like that didn't surprise her at all. "They like to test your patience first." I stayed with her until the sun slid behind the Miller house across the street. She didn't say much after that. Just sat quiet, watching the light stretch long across the porch. When her fingers started to stiffen, I helped her inside. Her Bible was open on the table, marked with a clipped church bulletin. Across the top, bold print read, "Community kitchen, closed until further notice." She didn't ask for supper. She asked for the dictaphone. I got it from the shelf and handed it over. She held it tight, then pressed her fingers over mine and said, "Not yet. After." I hated that word. I hated how calm she sounded saying it. "I'll be back at first light," I told her. She didn't answer, just nodded once, like she already knew what I'd find. I woke up before my alarm. Wasn't even 5. The sky still looked like it hadn't made up its mind. I crossed the street with my boots half-laced and my coat on inside out. Dorothy's door was shut, but the porch light still burned like she left it for me. Inside, she was still in bed, eyes closed, face peaceful. I said her name anyway. "Dorothy." Nothing. There was no panic, no shock, just a full, sharp breath and the feeling of something stopping mid-turn, like a clock that wouldn't tick again. On her table sat an envelope with my name written across the front, Chase, in shaky block letters. Inside was a letter, 2 pages long, and a small brass key on a red ribbon. The letter read, "You gave me a second Monday. That's all anyone my age could ask for. You kept showing up even when the world told you to quit. I don't know who sends people door to door, but if anyone does, they got it right this time. That key's to the metal cabinet at the old pavilion. There's something in it waiting for someone who doesn't mind hard work and slow thanks. Don't let them talk you out of good work, Chase. That's the trick they play. Make you think it don't count unless it's loud. Keep feeding people, even if it's just one bowl at a time." I sat there for a long while with the key wrapped around my finger like a promise. Then I picked up the dictaphone and hit play. Her voice came through soft but clear. "Don't let them talk you out of good work. Feed them anyway." That was it. Barely 30 seconds. I hit play again. When I walked out, the sun was up, and the sky was trying its best to look normal. I called the preacher first, told him it was time. Then I called Mom. By noon, folks started showing up. Not in a crowd, not all at once, just drips and steps, like rain that can't decide if it's staying. Some brought lilies, some brought nothing but quiet. A few kept their hands in their pockets like they didn't know what to do with them. The same mouths that whispered "crazy old woman" last month were suddenly full of softer phrases. "Poor thing, all alone," and the rest. I didn't say much. But when someone near the steps muttered that last one, I said, "She wasn't alone." And that was all I let out. 2 days later, we laid her down by the cedar fence at the edge of the cemetery, where the ground stayed soft even in summer. I didn't bring a poem, didn't need one. "She taught me showing up beats talking about it," I said, and then I stepped back and let the preacher do his part. After the service, Mrs. Gray came up to me with her purse tucked tight under her elbow. She pressed something into my palm. $42 cash and a scratch-off, she said. "It's the best I can do right now. Scratch it after dark. Feels luckier that way." I laughed once. Just a breath, no smile. "Thanks," I said, and meant it. That night, after I put Alice to bed and checked on Mom, I took the brass key from my coat and walked down to the old pavilion. I had to twist the lock hard twice before it gave. Inside the metal cabinet were 3 folded aprons, clean, crisp, still smelling faintly of soap, and a weathered tin with exactly $1,460 inside, counted and rubber-banded in small stacks. At the bottom, taped to the inside of the lid, was a typed sheet. "Dorothy's table, if anybody ever keeps their word." I didn't cry. I just stood there with the tin in one hand and the aprons in the other, feeling like I'd just been handed something heavier than money. A week later, I took the rescheduled SEAR test. I passed. It was 2 weeks after we laid Dorothy down when I heard my name called out behind me outside Quince's Market. I turned, half expecting someone looking for a handout or a ride. But it was a woman. Early 20s, pressed jeans, leather tote, and posture that didn't come from Cedar Hollow. She had Dorothy's eyes. That was the first thing I noticed. "I'm Rose Wilson," she said, voice steady but softer than I expected. I knew before she said it. There wasn't anyone else she could have been. I nodded once. "Come on," I said, jerking my head toward the pavilion. "You'll want to sit." We took the long way around the lot. She held a tan folder against her chest like it was keeping her together. The same cracked tile and faded siding waited for us at the pavilion steps. We sat, boots next to heels. "I should have come earlier," she said, not looking at me. "I've been sitting right where you are," I said. The night she passed. She didn't cry, just blinked slow and let the silence hold. Then she started talking. Told me about leaving at 18. Big city, small job, then a marriage that didn't leave bruises but left bruised up days. Told me how shame can talk louder than regret, how a phone weighs 100 pounds when you think someone gave up on you. She pulled out a postcard from her wallet. Edges curled, writing faded but still legible. One line stood out in bold strokes. "If time got away from you, I'm still right here." "I carried this till it nearly turned to paper dust," she said. Never mailed a word back. I didn't say anything. I figured she'd already told herself off more times than I could. She said she found my name on a folded page at the clinic. Dorothy had told the nurse, "If something happens, the boy with the steady hands gets the key." I reached into my coat and handed her the ledger and the tin. She opened the lid like it might break. Inside, everything Dorothy had written, tight loops, firm letters, dollar amounts, meal counts, names of people who'd promised to help back when the kitchen was supposed to open. She kept every bit of it, Rose whispered. Then she opened her own folder. Inside was a county-issued notice, pavilion declared surplus property. I scanned it twice. "If no community claim is made by end of quarter," she said, "they're selling it off." To who? My cousin already